Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 57 of the Road to 2K on Chess.com Rapid. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a recap video because for those of you who don't know me personally, not only do I play regularly on Chess.com and play regularly over the board at almost a weekly tournament, but I also play in a group called the Lichess Leagues, which is over on the other site, run by a great group of individuals, self-governed by the players with a group of moderators. You'll find the link down in the description so that you can join if you are interested. But essentially, there's three main leagues that go on, where there is a series league where you're paired with similarly rated players where you play a 90 plus 30 game. There is a 45-minute plus 45-second increment league where you play on a team of 8. And then finally, there's what's called the Lone Wolf League, which is a Swiss-style tournament, 11 rounds long, which actually just kicked off this week. So what I thought I would do is I play in all three of these leagues, so I wanted to sit down and show you the games that I played this week as being a part of the Lichess Leagues. So in our first game of today, it's going to be a little bit of a quick one. I was playing PV Gibson, who I've actually played before, and I fully went into this match expecting for him to play a Caro Kann. So if we look at the game, our opponent started with e4, so we played c6, d4, d5, e5, and c5. All of this has been seen before. This is the advanced Botvinnik-Karls variation. Now, I was fully expecting my opponent to play the critical line where you go D captures C, and I'd actually prepared a few lines against this that are a little bit tricky. Primarily, I was actually looking at playing E6 today. However, my opponent played knight F3. I opted to bring my light square bishop out, pinning it to the queen, and this is really the big advantage of playing the advanced Botvinnik-Karls variation as opposed to something like the French defense, where in the French, if our opponent goes for the same structure, if I can actually not have that be there, that'd be great. If our opponent goes for this, and let's say they go with the advanced French, then we can no longer play our bishop out, which is really the biggest point here. So after e4, and we get back into this position, our opponent plays knight f3, bishop g4, c3, and you can already see based on the clocks, we are both kind of in our theory at this point. I opted to play e6 after about 5 minutes of thought, trying to figure out whether I wanted to bring the knight out first, if I wanted to play a move like maybe knight to d7. I really just couldn't decide, or even taking the pawn in the center. However, I didn't love the position after queen to a4. Winning this back, I could probably play knight to c6. So after e6, d captures, I played the brutal move bishop captures c5, and immediately fell to queen to a4 check, paying a full bishop. And in this league, I've played this individual before. I know they're quite a strong individual. So I opted to, after a little bit of time, I just resigned the position. I unfortunately lost the game for our team in a spot where we really needed to get a win. And this, I wanted to make sure I included this game to show you guys that it doesn't matter what level you end up being, is you're always susceptible to just making mistakes, making opening blunders, and it's a part of the game, it's a part of the learning process. So in our second game, we played in the 90 plus 30 league. This is called the Series League. So 90 plus 30 is a pretty traditional classical time control. I played Mr. R. Borgia in 1980. I've actually played him 3 times. I won the first game, I lost the second, and he smoked me in the second. And in this game was kind of our big rematch. So I started with e4. My opponent played c5, and admittedly in this game, I did not do much prep for my opponent. I didn't know what he was going to go into, but since we played before, I remember that we had played a Vienna game, and maybe we would get some similar territory. So here I played knight to f3, and my opponent told me after the game that my opponent actually fully expected me to play knight to c3, going for the Grand Prix attack. However, I've recently been working on changing my opening repertoire, so I opted not to do that. I played knight to f3, my opponent plays knight to c6, we play d4, c captures, knight f6, knight c3, d6, bishop c4, expecting that our opponent can transpose into an accelerated dragon if they so wish. However, my opponent played queen to b6. Now, for anyone who's been following the channel for a little bit, You'll recognize this move, and we actually faced this from one of our opponents in the recent Phoenix Open. So I did think here for a little bit to kind of confirm what I wanted to do. In ultimate, I played knight to b3, which is the best move in the position. My opponent played e6. I played bishop to e3, tempoing the queen. And I had calculated out a variation where if our opponent comes up to b4, I was actually planning on bringing my bishop back to d3. And then if my opponent pushes like is the best line, I was probably planning on taking, although the engine evaluation says that I can just play h3, kick the bishop back, and be just fine here. However, none of that happened. My opponent played queen to c7, where the queen often lives in these types of Sicilian structures. I played the move bishop to f4 after quite some thought. Here, I was looking at the move castles, just getting my king out of the center. I was also looking at the move knight to b5 for quite some time, attacking the queen. However, I did feel that with my king in the center of the board, that doesn't do enough yet. The final move I was looking at here was actually queen to d2. However, I dismissed queen d2 because I didn't like the ideas of our opponent playing knight to g4, tempoing this bishop. Instead, bishop f4, my idea was that I am targeting this pawn in many ways, trying to win it with all my piece play. And there is really the big move here that I need to be able to play is knight to b5. Now, after my opponent thought for a long while, he played a6, which is the best move, completely stopping my idea and nipping that straight in the butt. I was also thinking that my opponent could play a move like e5. However, I wanted to go bishop to g5 in this situation, and my opponent is kind of hard-pressed for a move that doesn't allow me to damage their pawns. So instead, I played queen to d2. My opponent played knight to e5. I took their knight thinking that if they take back, which they did in the game, that I can play long castles threatening mate. However, I also thought that there was a line where my opponent can take the bishop here on c4. At this point, I would also long castle, which stops them from being able to take this bishop because, once again, there is queen to d8 checkmate. But after I took this, my opponent took back on d captures e5, and I believe the best engine move here is actually to just, not to castle, but to play a move like bishop to d3 first, and after they develop their bishop, then and only then do I castle and look for moves like f4. However, in this position, I guess I made a really big mistake. I didn't see it as a mistake initially. I thought that I was creating some suitable threats here. I long castled. And you can see that the evaluation bar immediately drops to -2 when the material is still equal. So I think this is one of those situations where I don't understand the Sicilian opening well enough to be able to figure all this out just yet. I also did not do great on my time utilization in this game because I've only used 15 minutes and we are on move 12. My opponent played bishop to d7. I played bishop to e2, trying to preserve my bishop. I probably could have gotten away with bishop to d3, defending this pawn, but I thought that stopping the battery here really ruins a lot of my plans. After bishop to b4, I played the move f3 to hold on to this pawn. Apparently, the engine just wants me to play queen to e3 and hold on to the knight this way, but you'll see very quickly why the engine evaluation has dropped so significantly from just a simple move like long castles. Our opponent castles, we play g4, trying to kick away the knights. My opponent plays rook f to d8, and now if the bishop moves, there is a discovered attack on the queen and the rook. I played g5. My opponent finds the best move, knight to h5, which I completely dismissed as being possible because I was thinking about earlier in the position when my bishop would have been seeing h5. And here is a position where I actually already considered resigning because I realized that the knight is going to be able to drop into f4, and there's really nearly no way I can see ever moving that knight. After queen to e3, my opponent once again plays knight to f4. I played rook h to g1 to try and stop the knight from coming in, but also to support maybe some kingside attack later on. After rook a to c8, I played bishop to d3. My opponent snaps off the piece. I go down a pawn, and not seeing any logical moves here for myself, without weakening my position, I played the move king to b1. My opponent finds the best move with bishop to b5, now putting 4 attackers on this bishop. And in this position, after about 15 minutes of thought, I went ahead and resigned. I can't play bishop captures b5 because there is rook takes, rook here, and I thought that there was queen check here on c2. It does look like that is correct, and at this point, yeah, they can take the rook. The king is forced to run, and moves like rook to c2 look strong. I was thinking that this game can continue like this, and then our opponent can take the bishop, and there really just is nothing left for us in this position. So very, very nice game by R. Borgia. Good luck to him in the rest of the series. I have to play, it's a round robin style, a round robin style where I have to play everyone in the group. So hopefully I can get some better results in future games. Then in the final game, we had the first round of the Lone Wolf series. And we actually played a player who is new to the series. His name is Chess Ethan at 1680 on Lichess Classical, and we were sitting at 1878 heading into this game. He played e4, so I had prepped the Caro-Kann against him. He went for the exchange variation, but played knight to f3 instead of the more traditional and a little bit more challenging, I think, bishop to d3. I played knight to c6. My opponent plays bishop to d3, I play bishop to g4, and then my opponent plays bishop to e3. Now, this is a fine move. You can see that it is already equalized for black because bishop to e3 is a bit of a passive move, and it looks like a giant pawn at this point. So, I opt to play e6 to defend the pawn on d5. My opponent plays knight b to d2. I play knight to f6, castles, bishop d6, and my development is nearly done. This is a position that I have seen probably hundreds of times at this point, and I was feeling completely fine about the position. My opponent played h3. I brought my bishop back to h5, and my opponent plays a3, which I thought was kind of a waste of time. Rather, the engine evaluation says to go ahead and play c3, support the pawn chain, and then play around the pieces. After a3, I go for castles just to get my king out of the center, rook to e1, and queen to b6 to target this pawn on b7, as well as to put some pressure here on the d4 pawn. My opponent played b4, so I just brought my queen back to c7 to create this battery towards the king. My opponent played c4, which I thought was quite a strong move. However, I played bishop to f4 first, just trying to trade off the bishops and really weaken these pawn structures since the c-pawn has pushed all the way to the middle of the board. After g4, I saw a very, very nice intermezzo here with bishop captures e3, and our opponent unfortunately played g captures h5. Now, in this position, I paused. You can see I only have 11 minutes and 15 seconds left. I realized that we had a tactic lurking here. I played what I think is an absolutely beautiful move, queen to g3 check. Our opponent cannot play king to f1, which would just be checkmate in 1. So instead, our opponent plays king to h1. We take a free pawn, although the engine, once again, Stockfish, says to go ahead and just take on f2 and call it good. But I figured that taking a pawn with check can't be too bad, and now here we see that their king is wide open. We are only up 1 pawn, but we have to bring the pieces to the advantage. So what I opt to do first, because I initially wanted to play a move like knight to g4, which fails because we just lose the piece back. We can take this knight at the end of that line and be fine, but it's not an ideal or a clean way to win. I also didn't like the idea of playing a move like bishop to f4, although it is the best move because of the move knight to f1. And I didn't see how to proceed in this position was really the biggest issue. However, so what I did was I removed the knight so that it couldn't jump to the defense. My opponent takes back with the queen, and here and only here do I play knight to g4. Now there's a mate threat on the board. Our opponent will likely have to either move the pawn or move the queen up to one of these squares. My opponent opts to go for f3, at which point I play queen captures h2 check, forcing the queen recapture, knight captures h2, and our opponent takes back the material. And in this position, we are up 1 pawn, so I opt to go up a second pawn with knight captures d4 threatening a fork on f3, and really just getting into the position very quickly. In this position, I was feeling a little bit stressed because if we look at the time situation, I'm now down to 5 minutes and 30 seconds to our opponent's 15 minutes. Our opponent plays rook to f1 to defend. We play d captures c4, taking the pawn, bishop captures c4, and then rook a to c8, tempoing the bishop. And here, after rook a to c1, I was starting to see tactics with maybe moves like b5. However, I decided to take a breath, see if there was no true threats yet, and I played rook f to d8, activating our final piece and really taking advantage of the two open files on the position. After king to g3, I was looking at the move rook captures bishop, which doesn't quite work because after rook captures, this check no longer wins a rook, which was really the whole idea of the position. Instead, after king to g3, I played h6 to create a luft for our king so that I will be able to run away and there's no back rank mate. After king to f4, I played knight to f5, stopping the retreating squares of the king, but also just getting my knight out of the center and allowing these rooks to be unleashed on the position. Our opponent played a4. At this point, I played rook to d4 check, winning the bishop. King to e5, rook captures c4, and you notice here that there is no way to the back rank, and this luft square is really going to make it a lot nicer for us to play in this position. Now, after rook f to d1, a lot of moves are fine here. I was looking at moves like king to f8, which is actually the best move because after any rook takes, if the rook comes in, now we step our king all the way to e7, stopping the infiltration and essentially stopping our opponent from having ideas of crushing us. However, I got a little bit nervous about my king getting stuck out on e7, so instead I opted to trade the rooks being up the material down to 3:25 on the clock. My opponent plays rook captures c1, and I opt to take a free pawn, defending the b7 pawn, and really the king is completely safe in this position. After you see rook to c8, king to h7, and rook to c7 attacking this pawn, I opted to take an extra pawn. Our opponent takes this one here. I played b5 to start pushing this pawn to victory. My opponent took the pawn on e6. I played rook to a6. And after king to d7, there's a really nice tactic here to go ahead and win the rook for the material because we do have these passed pawns. And I find it with rook to f6. Now, rook to f6 is a very interesting move because although it just trades, there is no place for our opponent's rook to go. If they go to e7, the knight is going to take. If our opponent goes back, it just blunders the rook. Obviously, if they take our pawn, we're going to take back with the king or the knights. And then finally, if they take here, which happened in the game, we just play g captures f6, king to e6, and I really don't care about these pieces here, but I do end up playing knight to d4 check just to win this extra pawn. Knight captures f3, king to c5, and a6. And the reason I play a6 is if my opponent wants to play a move like, the game ended here, if my opponent were to play a move like king to b6, going after this a pawn, at this point I just start pushing, and there is no way for my opponent to stop promotion. I surely can find checkmate with 30-second increment with a queen, a knight, and 2 extra pawns. So we move in the Lone Wolf series to 1-1, and we will likely get a quite strong opponent for week 2. I know this was a little bit of a less traditional video for us to do, but I like to show you guys everything I'm doing in my road to improve on my Rapid, including classical games, both online and over the board. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, let me know what I can do to improve. If you look down below in the comments, definitely, let me know what you think about the series and all the things we've been adding in. And then finally, check below, make sure that you're subscribed, and that just helps you to make sure that you don't miss any of my future content. And on that note, I will see you guys on the next day.